with the platform so smooth, keeps the workflow tight. Efficiency and value, I see every single night. Risk profiles, they got 'em, man, it's no joke. North America's the stage and they never choke. Metrics on point, updated without fail. Chameleon carriers, they're on the trail. Don't play with unsafe companies, don't be that guy. eCarrierChecks, keeping it safe under the sky. 40 plus filters with the search that can drive carrier information in the FMCSA archive. Find your carrier with precision and needs. Location, equipment feeds. They got the keys. FTL shipper leads. They're right there for you. Real-time authorities, what they do. Crazy, breezy, ultimates. The dashboards away. Freedom from low boards. They got it every day. eCarrierChecks, the architect leading the way.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to the eCarrierCheck show. Excited to be here. We've got an exciting guest on, and we'll get with him here in just a second. But, man, I tell you what, I am ready for the week. I've got some random stuff for you that you won't ever believe what I did over the weekend.
Oh, gosh.
I can't wait to it. But I'd love to hear about your week, Nate. Obviously, we're halfway through. You know, what are you hearing from phone calls? What's going on? And then we're going to get into Cody from A&Z Trucking and talk some fraudulent stuff and building Salesforce.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I will say that some feedback have gone. Double broker calls kind of coming up a little bit more. I know the last couple of weeks we didn't hear too much. People kind of calling in on that.
Sure.
But this week I've heard a lot more dealing with fraud. So
yeah,
definitely hearing that more.
Yeah, I always think double brokers show up when there's cash, and so there's going to be, there's swings in spot market rates, and that's where they kind of live, right? And so I think probably there's a swing or a bubble up and down of some sort. So I got to tell you, this weekend I listened to it, and Cody, I'd love to. I know you're a book guy. I read the new Brad Jacobs book.
I've not read it yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to it.
It is phenomenal. It blew my mind, man. This guy is honestly, it's got to be one of the best books in the entire world. He's like, I've never been in trucking. I'll just kind of figure it out. Takes 3 companies public. I mean, his story is phenomenal. But each chapter is almost like its own little book.
Yeah,
and that's what I love about it.
He's one of those guys, man. Just looking at him, he's going to be successful at whatever he does, right? Like, he's one of those obsessive guys that, I wish I had half of his knowledge and half of his energy, honestly.
Yeah, it's wild. Welcome on, Cody. Cody from A&Z Trucking, man. It's good to have you on. We knew each other for a while, but just for the sake of the conversation, give us a rundown. Why are you in trucking, man? How did you get into trucking?
Oh man, I've been in logistics in one form or another since I was 18, and that's I'm going on 40 this year, so it's been a long time. So, I started off honestly working for Walmart on the retail side of the logistics. So I was, unloading trucks at 18. I was helping with inventory. I was doing all that fun stuff, and then I actually went onto the shipper side. I worked for a very large warehouse in Utah. That's where I grew up. I was there for 12 years. When I left there, I was their manager of inbound, outbound logistics. I kind of ran everything from, all of the routes that were going out from the warehouse, everything coming into the warehouse, as well as, purchasing equipment, driver bids, recruiting drivers. It was a lot of fun. So I've kind of seen everything. I've hustled trucks. I've unfortunately wrecked trucks. I've backed up into light poles. I've done all sorts of things like that. I've loaded trucks, unloaded trucks. I've picked orders. Realistically, like from a logistics standpoint, supply chain, I've pretty much done it all. I moved down to Phoenix about 6 years ago to take a job with, I won't name them, but they're a very large produce shipper, grower. They're the largest actually in America. Starts with a T and ends with a farms. Anyways, I came down here. I was their executive director of supply chain for their deli warehouse down here. So it was like, yes. It was a different experience. It was a lot of ready, just in time, ready-made stuff. So if you go to a retailer and you're eating like the ready-made sandwiches, potato salads, all that fun shit, that's what we made. And that gave me a completely different perspective of things because, that is like the epitome of just in time. So then I started working with actually the owner of A&Z Trucking. His name is Saeed Zafar. on a project up in Denver, and I got to know him really well. And as soon as I was ready to make the jump, he'd been recruiting me for a little while, and been here for 5.5 years and haven't looked back. So it's been great.
God, I freaking love that. I got to tell you, I dedicated the better part of a decade to deli food group in my own life. I'm single. Life is okay. Let me get a potato salad and whatever you're cooking on the other end of that thing. I'm obsessed with delis. They're pretty good. I can't get enough of them. We used to live in Massachusetts, and I get this guy that they had the greatest deli ever. They would cut all the friggin' meat, and he would make the best sandwiches right then and there. I loved every friggin' minute of it. So, well, that's exciting, Cody. God, you've been in everything, man. Like you've kind of just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I have a pretty good perspective from, like I said, I mean, knowing what it goes into, like, picking orders for a store. Like I did shit on the ground level. Like, you're throwing 40,000 a day for a store and going home with a sore back. It's fine when you're 20 years old. It's definitely a young man's game. But like, yeah, from that to delivering to stores, getting to know store owners, it was a really good experience. And supply chain is definitely in my blood, and I don't think I'm ever going to get out of it. But, as on the brokerage side now, it definitely helped me, especially on the sales side, because I can go into a lot of conversations, understanding pain that people are having, and, talk the talk instead of, I don't have a sales background. I have an operations background. So when I can actually talk to decision makers that understand operations, my conversations usually go pretty well.
That's a lot to soak in right there, just because I think from the sales side of things, if you don't have that background, it can be harder to either address some of those problems that they may already be having. You know what I mean? So I love that you've got that background experience, because that helps so much in sales. You know what
Huge.
I mean?
Nobody wants to feel like they're being sold to, right? Like, you don't want to feel like you're being sold to on anything, but being able to just have a conversation and say, this is where we're struggling. And, you guys ever ran into this? What solutions have you come up with? And, those kind of conversations go a long way. You may not be able to get that sell for 6 months or a year. I've had customers that I worked for 2 years, but had great conversations with them, had them tour our warehouses. We own temp controlled warehouses in all the produce hubs in America too. So like Yuma, Salinas, Yakima, Washington. So, but being able to have those conversations and understand their pain goes a long way, because at some point in time, I think it was Jolly, actually, him and I were talking about this, you're going to get a 5 p.m. phone call on a Friday, right? And that might be your only in. You might have been prospecting those guys for a year now, and you get the same thing. And we're not onboarding anybody. We don't need any help, all that fun stuff. But eventually, I always joke that it's the pull your hair out moments, right? I shave my head because I've had too many of those. But like, it's those, oh my God, it's 5 p.m. on a Friday and I just had 5 trucks drop on me. What am I going to do? Right. And, if you're fresh on their mind and you've been, doing your due diligence, and they know who you are and they know what your capabilities are, you might get that phone call. When you get that phone call, you're probably never turning back.
Yeah, that's really good feedback, because we obviously, our crowd is a lot of new freight brokers coming in this industry. And Michael, I see your questions here. We'll get to them. And, a few things that we provide are shipper leads. And, a lot of people think, oh, I can make one call in a day and we land that sale. You hit it on the head, Cody. It's going to take months.
Oh, yeah.
If you're lucky, go buy yourself a lottery ticket. You might land a shipper in a day. But Michael had a good question here, Cody. Maybe you can answer this. Does it even matter right now how good of a salesperson you are? Because customers are getting called 10 times a day and won't even give us a chance.
I mean, I think 10 times a day is probably on the low end, to be honest with you right now. I mean, with where the market's at, I mean, it doesn't matter your pitch realistically, because like I said earlier, nobody wants to feel like they're being sold, right? But the best advice I can give anybody right now is do your due diligence, make sure that you understand who they are, what they do. The last thing they want is just a generic spam from Zoom Info or something like that, right? And make sure you just focus on building that rapport. LinkedIn is a huge tool as well. Try and build a relationship with them, and understand that the shippers you land on your first phone call are probably the shippers you don't want, because they probably have an awful credit rating or whatever it is. I've experienced that myself when I was a new broker. And the good ones are going to take time, and they want partners, and just make sure that you're focusing on being a partner instead of trying to focus on the sell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like maybe we got a little bit of volume issue or something like that. Guys, keep us updated if that doesn't change. I do have to say, obviously, Cody, you've been in the industry for long enough that you've seen sales cycles change. You've seen the way you're reaching out change. Talk to me about maybe how you utilize LinkedIn to build your network. Honestly, the most valuable asset that any one of us has is our network, right?
Absolutely.
It's people around, the relationships we have. Talk to us about how you've changed kind of the way you essentially your strategy with LinkedIn or your strategy with social media.
Yeah, I mean, so people want to work with experts, right? Like they want to know that you actually understand this industry. They want to make sure that you're not an 18 or 19-year-old who's been here for 1 month and you're just calling them because you're part of a call sheet, right? Like, so they want to understand that you understand the industry, that you understand their pains, that you understand that there are ups and downs, and that, at the heart of everything, like service is all that matters, right? I mean, price is going to be there. Price is always like typically number 2 or number 3. You're going to have some, I won't name them, but price is always going to win. But, at the end of the day, like coming from the shipper side, if I didn't have product to sell, it didn't matter what I paid for a truck, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if my retailers were out of product on their shelves, they're going to lose sales. That was always the big thing from the retailers whenever we would have our meetings with them is, if you go to a store for a certain item, right, and it's not on the shelf and you have to go to another store to get it, you're probably never going to go to that first store ever again. So, service is the utmost important. Communication, bad news gets worse with time. That's my favorite saying. You should deliver bad news quicker than you deliver good news, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants a pat on the back when you do a good job, but you definitely need to make sure that you're delivering that bad news quickly, because a lot of people can pivot, and they can't pivot if they don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you just turned yourself into a YouTube short right there, Cody. That's so good. Yeah, I can't agree. I can't disagree with more. Getting back to people, I think, Michael asked an interesting question, Cody, that I'd love for you to kind of address.
Sure.
It's, from the broker side, what are really good questions, or what are some examples of questions that he's asking? I think the questions that you're asking from an operational standpoint are probably what's giving you the advantage. How do you identify some of those questions from an operational standpoint? Is it just experience, or has it been
a lot of it's experience? But to answer your question just a minute ago, like LinkedIn's a huge part of that, right? A lot of people utilize LinkedIn to ask questions about issues that they're having at work, right? So if you happen to find a decision maker, you connect with them on LinkedIn, read all their posts. I've done that. I've landed customers several times who were a week ago. I'm going to look at what lane she was struggling with, and I'm going to go find a truck right now that's in my network, and I'm going to call her and I'm going to say, hey, I noticed last week you were struggling with this lane. I happen to run this lane. I've got a carrier in my network. What can we help out with? So, investigate a lot. I mean, right now it's really, really tough to make sales. Everybody knows where we're at in the market cycle right now. So the more you put in on the front side, even if it takes you a couple of days before that first initial touch, the outreach, the better off you're going to be. Do your homework though. That's the most important thing.
I like how you put what can we help out with? It just seems like okay.
Yep.
Kind of put the shoulders down. Someone's asking me for provide some help. I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah.
So many people just think it's all about the money, right? We had that conversation last week with Ed. It's not always about the money. It's just providing a good service and just willing to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, to give you some examples of questions, and we actually are going to talk more about this Friday. So watch our Friday show, because I'm going to list through some of those questions. We actually been talking about this a lot, and some of those questions are obvious, but some of them can be really specific around the industry.
Yep.
Cody, you obviously are very skilled when it comes to your industry, and the questions to ask. And so I think that's something really important in your sales process to keep doing.
Absolutely. And everything you can know about the company that you're prospecting is gold too, right? Even regionally, we utilize FreightWave data a lot. And, you can tell when certain regions are getting hammered with capacity, right? If you see all of a sudden there's a shortage of trucks, but you happen to have somebody delivering up there and maybe you don't have them booked on a backhaul already, the first thing I'm going to do is make some phone calls to some people that I don't work with and say, hey, I got a truck that's delivering on Thursday in your area. What can we do to help? Do you guys need any capacity? I noticed that there's a 40% tender rejection going on right now. My assumption is you're probably going to need capacity. So,
It wasn't a moment ago it was just a moment ago when trucks were impossible to get, right?
Oh, yeah.
They were paying gobs of money to get a truck, any capacity. The situation that we're in right now, obviously it's more challenging when it comes to sales. We're seeing, brokers continue to reduce how many are on the market, how many carriers are on the market, things like that. This is going to pass.
Oh, yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? You just got to keep your head down and stay consistent with your message.
Yep. This is a roller coaster ride, man. I mean, that's the best way to describe this industry, because the highs are never going to stay high, the lows are never going to stay low. And when you do get equilibrium, it doesn't last very long, right? So we all pray for that balance, right? Where everything's good. But, economically, anytime there's any kind of economic spike, it's going to drive the market crazy. And then vice versa. Anytime that there's a slowdown, it's going to drastically change capacity. And so you've got to be prepared and understand how to sell in both markets. And they both have their challenges and they both have, opportunities as well. So even in low times, there's opportunities, and understanding how shippers send out bids. I was taught a long time ago that the easiest way to get in with a shipper is to look at their low hanging fruit, right? So what kind of lanes do they have that maybe is only going once a month? There's, dedicated trucking companies don't want that, right? They can't cover that, quite frankly. So most of those lanes are going to go to brokerages. That's your opportunity. Even if you don't have a high margin on it, even if it's something that you literally have to hit the spot boards on all the time because it's only once a month and you don't have dedicated capacity for it, that's your in.
Yeah, honestly, and that was honestly how I made a living as a broker. I was like, what do you got for overflow? I'm not trying to ruin any relationship. What do you got for overflow? And then all of a sudden your overflow becomes the main relationship, 6 months to a year, maybe 3 years, who knows? But it was always interesting in that strategy of just, hey, what do you got for overflow? I'm not taking away from you guys.
Yep. Spot boards too. If you got customers with spot boards, like those are golden for you to build long-term relationships. We have one of our larger customers now that over a 4-year span, like we literally started with a couple spot boards from them that were LTL and spot loads. And then it was just a phone call after we ran to them saying, hey, if this is something you guys have every week, we'll just take this. Don't send it out to the board. We'll cover this for you. We've been doing great service for you. And then that got us on their full truckload bid. And that led to, we're doing 200 to 300 loads a month with them right now. So it took 4 years to get there, but it all started with that, what's your pain point? To your comment earlier, like what value can we add? Obviously this is an issue for you guys. So we're going to take that headache away from you. And when we take that one headache away from you, we'll probably find another headache we can take away. And then after that, you start getting those LA to Chicago's, right? That everybody wants. But you got to do the tough stuff first, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And honestly, I think the toughest part is what I've seen and experienced is, building a pipeline, filtering good leads, bad leads. How did you follow up? What did you say last email? Cody, tell me some of your experiences, how you built, did you build the pipeline? What did that look like? What are the things that you did for your sales strategies?
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. Pipeline is like critical, understanding the cadence of when you should reach out, because not everybody wants to get an email every single week saying, hey, just checking in. My opinion, just checking in is like a death sentence anyways. Like you should never say that, right? Usually when myself or my sales reps are checking in, it's because we're bringing up whatever's going on seasonally, right? Like the last 3 weeks, it's been really easy to check in because everyone's needed capacity because the snowstorms have just been brutal, right? So instead of just checking in, it's, hey guys, I noticed the capacity is really tight out of your area right now. Is there anything we can help out with? I know we're not set up with you guys quite yet, but I do have some capacity up in your area, stuff like that. And from a pipeline standpoint, just make sure you're organized. That's the biggest thing. Make sure you have a really good CRM. If you have a really good CRM, it should keep you organized. And at that point in time, just first off, never check in. Don't ever. Nobody wants that email that says, "Hey, just checking in." Yeah. Have things changed? No, things haven't changed. If they change, it'll probably reach out to you. But us, we're super heavy produce, right? And produce is notoriously very seasonal. So for us, it's getting in front of everything. Like, we understand when the seasons are going to change. Right now, it's really slow out of California, for example. But most of the Salinas bids, which usually, they're going to start moving in April. That's when the first cut happens. They start coming out in February. So right now, it's build up your pipeline of people that are going to be sending out RFPs next month. Make sure you're touching base with those guys every week, and just go from there. So understanding your niche, that helps a lot too, especially with the pipeline, because I'm not prospecting people for California in November. It just doesn't make sense, and I'm not prospecting the Arizona growers in, July. It just doesn't make sense. So, if you have a niche, stick to it and understand it really, really well. Like I said earlier, people want to work with experts. They want to know that you're an expert. If you're reaching out in July to people in Arizona saying, "Hey, you got any produce for me to move?" One, they're probably not going to pick up the phone, and two, they're probably never going to talk to you again. So it's just, yeah. So know your audience and know. I mean, produce is seasonal, but like, there's a lot of areas that are very, very seasonal, right? Given the area, and given, another thing is the reefer van split. I use this example a lot out of the Midwest, right? There's a lot of product during the summer that can move on vans, and during the winter it can't, right? They got to have freeze protection on it. So understanding that, like, knowing that during the winter, if you prospect out of the Midwest for, say, a Procter & Gamble, for example, who moves a lot of Tide that needs freeze protection, you stand a much better chance of getting them to pick up the phone and give you a chance during the winter, even though it's going to be harder for you to cover your trucks, than you do during the summer, when they have a glut of dry vans up there and they don't need freeze protection on reefers,
Yeah, there's so much to this too. Like, I remember the first guy, when we first started eCarrierCheck, it was me and a programmer, and he goes, "I'm really good at van guys," and I said, "Well, send me your pipeline. Like, who are you trying to go after?" And his entire pipeline was steel guys, and I'm like, I just don't know if that's gonna fit. Like, I was like, there is some interesting, like, I mean, this is an interesting observation from me, Cody. That, like, it's like, make sure you're following up with nurseries, at this time, not at this time.
Yep.
I love this. This is so good. Like, I mean, from a beginner standpoint too, it's really hard to gain this information without watching the world's greatest show, eCarrierCheck. No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely. I mean, your guys' tool is great too. I mean, your guys' tool is an easy way to get to the decision makers too. So.
We appreciate
it. Monica, thank you for being here. Erica, thank you.
Yeah, Charles Mundy,
ELLC. What's up, brother?
A lot of good being around today. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Michael asked an interesting question. We get this a lot. How often should you be following up? The cadence, it's almost like we're back to dating. You know what I mean? I know.
I'm going through it right now.
I went to the bar Friday night. How long? It's like Swingers. Do you remember? Michael's like the same age. Remember Swingers with Vince Vaughn?
I do, yeah.
How long are you waiting to call your babies? 7 days. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the cadence of calling and emailing and sending something. Man, this is it. You know what I mean? Like, let's solve this world issue right now, right here. What is it?
I don't think there's a silver bullet to it, but what I commonly do is I ask. I'll ask the question, when's your next RFP coming out? And if they say, "Hey, my next RFP is going to be released in March," I'll say, "Cool. I'll put it on my calendar to reach out to you in February." And then, regardless of the time frame, if I know that there's zero chance for me to get set up with those guys between now and when they say their next RFP is going to be out, I'm honestly not going to put forth the effort to try and continue to reach out for them. One, you become a nuisance, and two, like, you could be prospecting other people. Not everybody releases their RFPs at the same time, right? So that's a typical question that I ask as soon as I get that follow back or that email back of, "Oh, hey, we're not onboarding any carriers right now." Cool. Well, is there a time frame that you normally do? There's some companies that literally have, like, the beginning of the year. January is the only time they onboard carriers, right? Because they're trying to plan their capacity for the next year. That simple question, usually they don't shy away from that, because what do they have to lose? Nothing. So if you ask that question, you'll probably get the answer, and then make sure that you're putting that in your CRM and you follow up diligently. But, and going back to the seasonality thing, a lot of that depends on what you're prospecting. Like, I probably couldn't tell you how to prospect auto parts. I don't move auto parts, and stuff like that. I don't know how seasonal those are. But if you're in a niche that's very seasonal, do your homework, understand it, and know when to prospect, because everyone has a capacity crunch at some point in the time during the year, regardless of where we're at in the cycle of everything. There's always a time where trucks are tight in every single area in the US. There's always a bull market somewhere, right? You just have to understand it. And the more you understand the industry and your niche, the more you'll understand the best times to prospect. During those seasonal times, I'll follow up every week, right? Not follow up, but I'll touch base with them every week. But during the off peaks, I'll see if I can grab dinner with them if I'm going to be in the area or something like that. But outside of that, don't bother them, because I've been on the shipper side. Like I said, I was on the shipper side for 12 years, and building the relationship is great, but most of the time I would reach out to brokers if I needed them. It wasn't the other way around. I don't think I ever set up a broker the first time they called me and were like, hey, can I get some of your freight? Probably not. You call me on a Monday when things are going fine, there's no snowstorms, it's not my busy time of year, I don't need capacity. But if I got your number, I did a little research on you, I understand that you're an actual expert, you're not some crazy double broker that just got my number from somewhere, then yeah, I'll probably call you guys. You'll get that hair pulling moment from me, like 100%. And most of the decision makers, you'll get that at some point in time. You just got to stay relevant. That's where LinkedIn comes in. Realistically, like that's been my biggest thing with LinkedIn is the more content you produce, one, they know that you're an expert. They know that you know what you're talking about, right? And two, if they start following you and they start liking some of your stuff, that's a great sign. That means that they're paying attention to who you are. They understand who you are. And at that point in time, it might not happen tomorrow, it might not happen 3 months from now, but you'll probably get that call at some point in time.
Yeah, Michael, this is definitely. I used to have this guy when I was trying to take over bodybuilding for 175-pound kids at 18 years old, which I'm not 175 anymore. I don't want to talk about it. We don't need to talk about weight. People bring weight on the show. But I swear to God, this guy would always say, we'd start doing reps, and he'd be like, all right, we're doing 3 sets of 12. And then I'd get to 12, and he'd be like, you got to do one more. Well, I've always taken that same approach in my sales process. And Michael, in my personal opinion, I mean, God bless it. Cody just brought the house right there. Let's just simplify exactly what he just said. You've got to ask the question, when should you follow up next?
Yep.
Because if there's not an action item to the end of that conversation, you're going to be in no man's land and you're guessing. Well, I sent him my setup packet. Now what?
Correct. Yep.
Ask him. You always have to do one more. So if you're into bodybuilding, which I was at 18, and I looked amazing, you have to just do one more question. So you're only as good as the questions you ask, and Cody just hit
100%.
that. I freaking love that. Monica says it depends on the conversation for me. Adding specific notes to the CRM helps me schedule follow-up calls. Yeah, you just have to have Monica. By the way, Seven Oaks is really friggin' phenomenal. But Monica's one of my favorites. It's fun lady. Cody, you mentioned earlier, a double broker getting your cell phone, or getting the classic cell phone leak. By the way, if you've never dove through that data, it's very entertaining. We've never done it, but it's very entertaining data. But obviously, the fraudulent market has been an interesting year. Some weeks they're more prevalent than others. If you're posting up your loads on the spot market, we hear it all the time. Like, well, how do I do this and that? Give me a rundown. What are your thoughts on double brokering? Does this ever go away? Is it here to stay?
Man,
what seems to be your thoughts when it comes to
there's so many great tools out there to help, but these guys get smarter and smarter all the time. They get I won't lie. I fell for a phishing scam where they hacked my DAT account 6 months ago. And I went, I'm the VP of sales. Let's be real. I don't really post a load, right? So all of a sudden my team calls me and they're like, hey, did you just post 1,200 loads for flatbed? And I'm like, well, one, we don't do flatbed. And two, no, I didn't. What's going on? But I clicked on a email that I shouldn't have apparently. And they hacked my DAT account, and they're getting smarter and smarter. I don't think it ever goes away until the FMCSA really steps in and does something major. And I don't know if that's ever really going to happen. And it's hard to identify some of that stuff. I understand that, but you just got to do your due diligence, and not to knock the load boards at all, but if you're one of those brokers that live 80% of your volume gets covered on load boards, you got to be prepared for a couple of them to slip through each year. Just keep building that stable of carriers. We're at a close to 90% carrier utilization. We don't post very many loads, but we've been in business for 20 years. We have a lot of great carrier relationships. But then, I don't know. To answer that, I really honestly don't see it going away. They're getting worse and worse, it seems like. And when I think you guys were talking about it earlier, like when the market spikes, like it has the last couple of weeks, they go crazy, right? When the market's low and there's not a lot of, activity on the boards, they seem to be, probably scamming some other industry, maybe banking or some shit like that. But as soon as the rates go through the roof, they're all over it, Yeah. And the poor carriers are, brokers have some liability, don't get me wrong, but the poor carriers are usually the ones that are stuck, running a load and not getting paid a penny for it. And it sucks, especially if they can't, put the pieces together and figure out who the original broker was. And they really get screwed then. So I don't know, man, it's really bad out there. They're getting awful. I think the rise in I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but like the rise in the third-party dispatch has definitely not helped at all either. A lot of those guys kind of blur the lines between what a broker and a dispatcher can do. And they may not be as malicious as some of the overseas double brokers that seem to be prevalent, but there's still issues that come up. When you don't have any skin in the game, you're, say you're a dispatcher and you double broker load, and you're not trying to be an asshole about it, but you're just trying to make a living, keep your trucks covered, whatever you're doing. And say there's an accident or say there's a claim, you just disappear because you have no insurance, you have no skin in the game. And it's either the carrier or the broker that foots the bill, or a combination of both. And at the end of the day, you're doing something illegal and you shouldn't be doing it. And, everybody just needs to stay in their lane, but it's awful out there. And now I'm hearing that the double brokers are posing as shippers now. So like to steal broker MCs and all sorts of shit, right? Like that's crazy to me.
We just had that happen on Monday. One of my users called me and was asking me to look into the shipper. Well, this guy pretending to be a shipping manager for some potato company. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to get referrals of other shippers that broker was working with.
Yep.
And this guy, wait, why is this guy asking for shippers?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So anyways, long story short, his name's Justin. He ended up actually talking to the actual shipper, the actual shipping manager, and actually quoted some notes for it. It was kind of nice. But yeah, I see that now. It's crazy that the length they're going to try to scam you into this type of thing. It's crazy.
Yeah. The hot thing that we saw, originally, you can just rewind a few of our shows 3-4 months ago. If they didn't have an inspection, you kind of knew.
Yep.
Right. Now they're just buying. Buying all these companies going out of business. And yesterday I was at a brokerage working with them and just kind of doing some sales stuff. And they posted a load. They didn't have anybody on it. And no kidding, this was insane to me. 7 phone calls. All 7 of those companies matched on eCarrierCheck.
Mm-hmm.
They were somehow looped together.
Yep.
And they all had different MCs. They all had different DOTs. They all had, no kidding, they all had an inspection. And we're sitting there and I'm like, I don't think this is right, man. Like this isn't going the way you need it to. We got to start picking up the phone and calling some carriers.
Oh, yeah.
And it was wild, man. So it's a market out there that you got to jump through the forest and have a machete with you. So
yeah, and I, when my DAT account got hacked, there was actually, by the time I realized it got hacked and the time that DAT took it down, I think it was 7.5 minutes or something, right? But in that 7.5 minutes, they happened to book 2 loads with 2 carriers, and those carriers happened to call me that night. They got my number, right? And so I talked to them and kind of told them what was going on and told them if I was you, I think those 2 were power only loads. I'm like, I would take them back to the shipper. I don't know what to tell you, right? But going through the rate con, they sent me the rate cons, and I'm like, so it's got my header, ANZ Trucking, right? But down at the bottom, it says send your BOLs to this random Gmail account and this other company. I'm like, so carriers, you got to be a little bit smarter too. Like you got to do your due diligence as well, because to your point, they're buying MCs, not just from carriers that are going under, but from brokerages too. I read some data that there's like 8,500 brokerages that have closed their door the last year or something like that. if somebody comes up to you, you're going to close your company and you got nothing else to lose. And they're like, oh, I'll pay you $5,000 for your MC. All right, cool. Right. Yeah. And
Here
so,
you go.
yeah, exactly. So they're taking it and it might only get them a month's worth of, fraudulent activity, but that month's of fraudulent activity might be a couple $100,000. Who knows, So it's tough out there though. Those bad actors are finding out different ways to look like good actors all the time. So you have to stay on your toes. So, eCarrierCheck's a great tool. Everybody who's an eCarrierCheck, subscriber, use it. I mean, don't ever, the biggest thing you can do is like, okay, we've done it. This is our process, but I'm just going to skip it this time because it's late on a Friday and I just need this load covered, right? That's going to bite you in the butt more often than it's ever not going to. And it's worth that extra 10 minutes or whatever to vet that carrier properly versus having your load held hostage or disappear across the border. Or, there was one here locally, actually, I'm in Phoenix, that it was an entire load of ribeyes, right? I think the value of it was like $250K or something. Well, it crossed the border over into Yuma, never came back. I think it was JBS or something like that. And, that poor broker had a $250,000 load that they booked on a fraudulent carrier. Somebody across the border is eating some cheap ribeyes for really good, So I don't know, just make sure you guys are doing everything you can.
Oh, for sure.
I love, real quick, I mean, this is kind of important. If you were going to buy a piece of meat, there's ribeyes, there's New York strips. What's your go-to? Like, if you're right at a deli counter right now, what's your go-to? I love ribeye.
I'm a ribeye fan for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't get enough of it. The other day, this was kind of interesting. I didn't even know they made this. I should know more about cows. I live in Nebraska, for the love of God. But they have these, you can buy New York strip roasts.
Oh, yeah.
$6.99 a pound. I just went and dominated and cut 1-inch strips. Right. And it was...
Yep. I do the same thing when they have the rib roasts on sale, around Christmas time too. I'll go stock up my freezer and you just slice those things in nice 2-inch thick steaks and you're good to go.
Ooh, I can't get enough of it. Charles is a ribeye guy too.
Yeah, I love it.
Let's move Monica real quick. Let's see what she says. Our carrier is doing a great job of checking the brokers before taking the loads. Factoring companies are red flagging the double brokers, trying to minimize the damage. Yeah, she's from a factoring company, Cody, and honestly, we all have to jump in. It doesn't matter which friggin', it doesn't matter if you're in insurance. We've even seen fake insurance certificates. I mean, it doesn't take much to do a PDF. It really doesn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you bring up factoring companies because that's another red flag for us. There's certain factoring companies that are notorious for working with some of these characters, and those are red flags in our system. And then also, utilize those guys. I don't know what company Monica's from, but we partner up with several factoring companies. And if anything looks fishy, we're going to contact those factoring companies before we ever give a load out to a new carrier that perhaps we don't know anything about. Maybe they're missing an inspection. Maybe they had a big gap in their history or something like that. Because I know that factoring companies, they have a very rigid, onboarding process compared to a lot of other people. So,
yeah, absolutely. How important is it to run credit? You think at this point in the fraudulent aspect of things? Obviously, there was the great conversation of convoy. Did they pay all their carriers or not? It looks like they did. It looks like everyone was there. But all these brokers going out of business, obviously, how many carriers actually didn't get paid and then put them out of business in the same aspect of things? I mean, how important is it to run credit?
I think it's important, but the problem with credit is it's not forward thinking, right? So you're not seeing what they're doing today. So if you're booking a load with them today and maybe they're 45 days behind, but that hasn't actually recorded yet, you don't know where they're going to be at. A lot of brokerages, if they're going to close their doors, it's not like a slow bleed, right? It's like, they're going to go within a month or two. Yeah. And at that point in time, it doesn't matter because their credit that was reported last month might be good, right? So it's definitely still something that you need to be aware of because if you see somebody that's got a 45 days to pay and their credit score's a 50, probably shouldn't take that load regardless of what it pays. There's probably a reason why they're the highest on the load board, and it's because nobody's going to take the load from them. because they're pretty risky. But yeah, I think it's definitely good. I mean, we're always conscious about our credit score, but like I said, we've been in business for 20 years. We're not going away anytime soon. So, but keeping a great credit score will definitely open a lot of doors for you on the carrier side. A lot more carriers are going to work with you if you have below 30 days to pay.
Real quick on, I don't know, we can tread in these waters here a little bit. Obviously, there's the canal issues that are happening, and probably going to cause a little bit of a ripple in America's supply chain. First and foremost, I watched too much TikTok, but there was a guy that was like taking down one of these attacks on one of the American boats trying to go in there. There's a cat just sitting on the side of the friggin', just got the bazooka, and he's like, I'm going to shoot it at this friggin' boat. Now it was a toy bazooka, and it hit it, and it did explode, but it wasn't like a movie where it exploded the whole boat. What are your thoughts on the canals? I mean, are we going to see a big disruption this summer? Are you going to see a rise in fuel costs?
I hope not. I'm reading a lot of air freight is starting to increase a lot because of it. A lot of people are just biting the bullet. I know it's a little bit more expensive than ocean, but a lot of people are saying, once again, it goes back to my comment earlier, like if I don't have the product to sell, it doesn't matter what freight I paid for it, right? So I do understand that air freight starting to see a big uptick because of that. I'm hoping it's not big. We've had several disruptions throughout the last 4 years that have just caused nasty ripple effects, either positive or negative. And it would be nice to have a year or two where we could have a little bit of stability, where we can kind of predict where the market's going to be, and you can predict your seasonality and the normal stuff that's going to happen. But all these things, I hope honestly it doesn't have a major impact on oil and gas prices, because diesel prices, that puts more small carriers out of business than anything. It's not necessarily your line haul charge. Everybody likes to, talk about rates, but diesel is a huge portion of their costs. So I hope the diesel keeps coming down. We don't want it to get too low to a certain extent, because then it has a detriment to the economy at that point in time. But, we don't want it at $5 a gallon either. Nobody wins at any point in time except for Chevron.
That's a fair statement. I love that. Yeah, I had a weird situation in Havasu one time with a water cannon that kind of caused a little bit of a disruption. So I'm hoping that was a weird time in my life as well, to be honest with you. But you never know what a water cannon will do to a boat, I'll tell you that. Last question. Obviously, we've taken up a lot of your time. We appreciate you being on. You've seen the cycle of presidents come and go since you've been in this industry for so long. Election years, they're almost like an asterisk. They're like, election year. Everybody's like, it's an election year, bro. Obviously, I'm not looking for what stance or what side of the shore you're on, blue or red. What does it normally do in your neck of the woods, like right in the underground? I mean, is it affecting you at all? You just keep your head down and grind. What does it look like for you?
So, I mean, I usually don't put too much thought into it, but if you look back historically outside of 2020 when COVID was going, election years are kind of just ho-hum. Like you usually don't see a dip, and you usually don't see a bull market either. It's kind of just steady Eddie, because the current, president doesn't want to rock the boat. Let's be honest. They're trying to get reelected. And that's just kind of been, if you look back, I mean, I think that I talked to Dean a lot over at DAT, right? And we talked about this, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And I think they had like 21 years worth of data or something. And outside of 2020, there was never a delta that was more than like 3% on rates. So like, I personally don't know where rates are going to be at the end of this year, but I don't see them, charging up or charging down. I think we've kind of found the bottom for the most part, to be honest with you. But I don't see a huge uptick, especially with it being an election year. So,
yeah, absolutely. Looks like Michael's got one last one here. Cody, can you give us a tips on how to be the best broker possible?
Communicate, be honest, and honestly, don't chase the margins. The margins will always come. Good service. I always like to tell my team, like, money is a byproduct of success. Be successful at what you're supposed to do. So if your expectations are X, make sure you're hitting X. And at some point in time, your margins will steady. I know all of us are trying to make money in this industry. We're not moving freight for free. I understand that. But at the end of the day, service level will always dictate where your margins are going to fall for the year. And, don't fall in love with what's happening in a month too, because, we've all experienced this the last 3 weeks. I think everybody's got their ass kicked on the brokerage side the last 3 weeks because of the weather problems. But, that's not where the market's going to be. Just stay the course. Make sure that you guys are grinding. Make sure you're using every tool that you can. eCarrierCheck. Keep grinding, guys, like this. Yeah, exactly. Like Monica said, the money will follow. Just do your job. Like, honestly, just do your job. Make sure you're being a partner.
Yeah. Control the controllables. That's all you can do.
Yep.
Cody, thanks again, man. You guys, if you missed it or just showed up late, freaking rewind this video because it was freaking awesome. Lots of value. Cody, how do people get in touch with you? How do they get to figure out more about you and ANZ Trucking?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find the company on LinkedIn as well. Our website is www.anztrucking.com. But LinkedIn's the easiest way to reach out to me if you guys want to chat about anything or, any tips or tricks. We don't know everything, but we've definitely been in the business long enough that we've probably seen a lot of the issues that some of the newer guys are experiencing. So,
sure.
Cody, thank you for being on, man.
Yeah,
I hope you have an awesome day. It was great to have you on.
thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, Cody. See you guys.
Have a good day.